welcome back to Research Works podcast. We're here once again at the pre-conference workshop in Melbourne for EACD and the IAACD of 2025. And with me this morning, we have the president of the IAACD, Professor Christine Imms. Hello.
Hi, Dana.
It's so nice to have you here in this beautiful setting.
Glorious.
It is amazing. And this is day 2 of the pre-conference workshops. And you've already been actively part of the conference already. But before we get into what I really want to talk to you about with participation in the workshops you've been chairing and supporting, I thought it'd be really nice to know a little bit about how you came to be president of IAACD, because you do wear many hats, and this is just one of them.
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, so I've been president of the IAACD since the triennial conference in Australia in 2022. And of course, that was sadly a fully online conference because of COVID.
Yes.
But I've actually been involved in the through the establishment phase of the IAACD prior to its formal inauguration, which occurred at that time.
Okay.
And so it's the International Alliance of Academies of Childhood Disability started as the brainchild of Hans Forsberg and Bob Armstrong, and people who really thought we can do better.
Yeah.
We can do better if we're actually collaborating across the globe, and that we build capacity locally by joining forces globally. And so with that vision, the work started of, well, how do we form an alliance of academies? And we started with the 3, the American Academy, the Australasian Academy and the European Academy were the founding members. And with that kernel of membership, if you like, we then went out, and Hans was incredible at going around the globe and seeing where were the opportunities to support either already established academies of child disability or actually support passionate people who wanted to form academies. And so once there was a member academy from each of the main regions of the globe, our constitution could be fully implemented. And that happened at the very end of 2021. And so at that conference in 2022, I took up the inaugural presidential role. And that was through a formal nominations process and a voting across the different member academies at that time. And we established our first executive committee with Arnav Seal as the secretary, myself as the president, and Josh Hyman as the treasurer. And so we've been doing that now for 3 years, but I think it's really important to recognise the years that came before. And I guess the really exciting thing is that we've continued to grow our membership. So we started with 3 founding academies. We needed to have 7 academies to become constitutionally active. And we now have 11 member academies, which is really fabulous. Our newest member academy is from Japan. And we're so excited to have representatives of 9 of the 11 member academies are here at the conference this year, which is really fabulous.
That's a great backstory. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that is really incredible, the work that was done, the vision that was set, and starting to really see it today. You know, there's Sebastian was talking about yesterday, there's over 2,000 people here from over 80 countries. So that is incredible when we're thinking about bringing people together. What is it about the International Alliance that excites you the most, Christine? I mean, there'll be many things there that I think you would absolutely love, but is there one thing that really excites you?
The thing that excites me the most is the fact that there are passionate people from around the globe with a common vision that we can do better to enable anyone who's growing up with a childhood onset disability or developmental concern and their families health, well-being, participation and a good life. We're a long way to go in probably all parts of the world. I don't think anyone is an exception. Maybe pockets of excellence, but actually I think most countries have areas of deep concern of inequity of access to services, of inequity of opportunity for even accessing the basics of life. And so again, the thing that I think is really fantastic is that you bring those diverse experiences and the diverse knowledge from South Africa, from East Africa, from Japan, from Mexico, from wherever. And our vision is the same. But our methods of getting there differ, and we can learn so much from each other.
Absolutely, because that way it's so much more efficient, isn't it? Otherwise you're constantly reinventing the wheel, and that's not what we want to be doing.
No, we don't want everyone to start we can catch each other up. But I also don't want anyone to think that, okay, so I come from a high-income country, I must have all the answers. I definitely do not. We definitely do not.
I agree.
And I always learn more than I think I share when it comes to any of those international collaborations.
Yeah. It's the creativity and what people have really thought about within their context. And at some point, our experiences, there's so many commonalities in our experiences. The context may be different, but we can still learn from their approaches, can't we?
Yeah, we can. But we can also recognise that there are some settings where the disparities are huge, and the inadequate opportunity of basic needs being met. I think that's definitely true in many parts of the world. And I think the information from the registers around, where is the distribution of, for example, young people with cerebral palsy. And we see in Australia this really encouraging reduction in prevalence, really encouraging reduction in severity. We don't see that in every other country yet, because there are other work still to be done. So I guess it's about how, as you say, how do we catch up as fast as we can.
And I suppose what you touched on there a little bit about the overall vision and having the hope for better quality of life and participation is an area that we all know you're very passionate about when it comes to participation. Starting very broadly, why is participation so important, Christine?
so Dana, it's a funny question, isn't it? I feel, why do we even need to ask that question? Every minute of every day I am participating in something, as are you, as is the child next to me, as is the family. And what we are participating in and the quality of that participation really matters. And I think we have tricked ourselves into thinking that as a therapist, it's the skills I teach the child that will enable them to participate. And we have forgotten that it is the everyday life that is really important for skill development. And the talent of the therapist is to embed their expertise in everyday life, to unobtrusively scaffold and support a child and family to be active, involved, engaged participants within their everyday life, whether it's at home, in preschool, in school, in the local footy club, wherever that is for that child and family, in nature. And I think that's a real challenge for us as therapists, because we come with a set of disciplinary knowledge. We share that in multidisciplinary teams, and that is really crucial. But we also seem to think that our magic hands will make a huge difference. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it's not what we know, it's where we place what we know and how we use what we know that really matters. And so if participation is being able to turn up in everyday life, and when you're there, be deeply involved, that's what participation is. Participation is not having the skills to do the task. Participation is about being able to be there and to be deeply involved while you are there. And when you are involved, that is when learning happens. That is when the developmental opportunities are there. And we know that the biggest barriers to participation are in the context, in the activity setting. They're the people, the place, the activity, the objects, the time that's required in that space. Those are the biggest barriers to participation when we think about participation as attendance and involvement. The skills and abilities a child brings, their preferences, their sense of self, their confidence, those things are really crucial as well, of course. They are what they take to that experience, but they're also what they learn from that experience. And that's what we really need. So if we can scaffold participation in everyday life, we can build those skills and abilities through that experience. And not only do we do that, but we set the scene for the next excellent participation experience for someone. We all have participation experiences that are not great. Every now and then it goes poorly.
We can all experience it.
Happens to everybody.
One
or two, a few poor participation experiences where you don't feel involved, when you're not, can't get there, whatever the reason. We're resilient to those. But many children and families experience that repeatedly. And so what they learn is, I can't, I don't, they won't allow, that's not who I am. And so you lose, it's a negative spiral as opposed to a positive spiral.
Yeah. As you describe all of that, Christine, you know, as a person that is committed to this area, you cannot help but to be inspired, going, this is what we're here for.
Yeah.
But what is, obviously we talk about this a lot, and we're, you know, definitions are so important so people understand what it is we're talking about, which is, you know, involvement and attendance. What is the rub sometimes? Because we still try to shift therapists along and bring them on this journey of going, we really need to value participation, but we do still see a lot of approaches that are not participation focused or based. What do you think is the barrier for clinicians or therapists in adopting more of this approach?
I think there's multiple barriers actually, and I wouldn't like to say that there aren't interventions that are very appropriate at a body structure and function perspective, at a build the skills perspective. I think the challenge for people is the how do I achieve it? And we know that the crucial importance of practice for learning, and scaffolded practice for learning for children. But again, it is, if I want you to learn to do something, Dana, and I sit down and I teach it to you, I help you to learn the strategies that you need to achieve that, and then I go, okay, we just need to get some mass practice in. So we know that practice, when it's embedded in an everyday activity setting, actually is very much different, because you have a different experience of trial and error, you have a different experience of when it works and when it doesn't, and you can scaffold for people what is needed. So the difficult thing, I think, for therapists is, particularly if you are pressured for time, if your structure and your systems within your healthcare environment or your disability care environment are such that you actually have to provide a certain number of services within a certain amount of time, you actually have some need to see X number of people in a day, a week, or whatever. Then actually suddenly people are thinking, well, I can do it this way. I just tell you, I just download my skills, or I do what I want to do. And then you go off and I give you your homework and you practice, and if it doesn't work, it's because you didn't practice enough. And I think it's, you know, or that we didn't set it up in the right way, so we need to come back and check again. It's a very different way of thinking, and I think we have to change how we design our service system to enable the expertise to be able to uplift all our mainstream services for children and families. So where children and families normally turn up, there ought to be some level of knowledge around how to support children who have a range of developmental concerns. And then you can slowly layer on top of that the expertise that is needed for those children who bring more and more complex concerns. So I think there's a service systems issue, but there's also a knowledge base concern as well. We know that we don't have good evidence that if I work as a therapist on body structure and function, or even activity performance, that actually that translates into participation outcomes. We actually have good evidence that it doesn't. And it's really hard to hear that, I think. So then it means, well, what does participation-focused intervention look like? And the most important thing about a participation-focused intervention is that when you're trying to figure out what the problem is, that you involve the child and the family in figuring out what the participation problem is. You focus on, it's a problem with attendance, or it's a problem with involvement, too much or too little. And either in this life situation or across the range of life situations. Okay, so that's maybe there's almost never one participation problem, there's usually many more than one. But then you need to sort of think about, well, what's the underlying issue here? And I think often when we start to look for underlying issues, therapists are very skilled at assessing children. So they find a few concerns about the child and stop looking.
Because you're always going to find those. Right.
And so, but if you don't look in the context, you don't look in the environment, you miss the crucial pieces of what's contributing to the participation problem. And if we focus our attention on making those contexts, those environments available, you know, accessible, affordable, accommodating, acceptable to everybody, then actually we can provide those learning opportunities in everyday settings. Which is where mass practice can happen.
That's right.
Because I'm there doing it, and I'm there doing it with everybody else. And that sounds simple, and it is not. It takes a lot of careful thinking and planning, but it also takes bringing everybody in the situation into the planning and working out what it is that's needed. So it's not just up to the therapist. You can't do it alone. You need to do it with family. You need to do it with childcare workers. You need to do it in the school. You need to do it in the sports club with those people. And people in those settings, they know what will work and what won't work. And we know what is needed, but what will work is something else. And we've got to bring those two bits of knowledge together.
And that requires quite a skill set for development. I see what you mean by that. There is the ability to bring people together and hearing what everyone's contributions will be, and not feeling like, I think perhaps as therapists it's my responsibility, and but to coordinate that is actually a skill in itself. In the workshops that you had for the pre-conference, what were some of the main things that kept coming up? Were they general themes of where people are up to at the moment, or directions that you noted?
I think it was interesting. So when we present, what we were presenting on was some of the range of studies that we've been doing in the CP Achieve Centre for Research Excellence in Australia. So we've been working for 5 years collaboratively with young people with disability and their families, and researchers and clinicians to design our research. And we were talking about what we have learned about participation across the range of life situations that young people with CP told us were important to them. And so we were asking about their attendance and their involvement, but we also asked them about how the environment influenced their attendance and their involvement. So we asked about those 5 A's. You know, does availability get in the way for you? All of those right the way through to accommodations and acceptability. And so we were able to learn from this particular group of young people aged 10 to 35, you know, what proportion of them need the environment set up for them to be able to participate. And we're also able to learn to what extent that's being achieved for them. And that's really important information. So mostly we're learning that the sort of about 50 to 85% of people with CP need adjustments in the environment to be able to participate in home life, in healthcare, in employment, in education, in relationships, in all of those life situations that are important to them. So that's the first thing to know. The second thing is that mostly the arrangements sometimes make it harder for them to participate, as opposed to what we want, which is that the arrangements are making it easier or enabling full participation. The really concerning thing for us has been that we see that and the data is there, and yet so we see this sense of, I don't have what I need to be able to participate. I'm participating at relatively low frequency with a good attendance when I'm there, but relatively low, good involvement when I'm there, but relatively low attendance. But the desire for change is really low. So my concern is that there's a really low level of expectation. Okay, so we have more than 50% who will say, the arrangements are not acceptable to me.
But I guess that's life.
And 25% who want it to change.
Wow.
So this is, I mean, for me that's deeply concerning. There's a generation of young people who don't have high expectations of what it should be like.
That feels very sad for me in terms of what could be achieved and what will drive it. We often say, right, the driving force will be from our young people, but if their expectations are so low, that's so from there, I guess, call to action.
Call to action.
What's the call to action here, Christine? Because I feel like this is what we need to do, right? This is important stuff.
So for me, the entry point for participation for every single person is those 5 A's. So if I'm a therapist providing a service, if I'm a physician seeing young people with a disability, if I'm working in education, if I'm working wherever I turn up in my role, it's the having front of mind that it's inequitable if I'm not available to everybody, and that includes people with a range of disabilities, a range of communication needs, a range of cognitive support needs, whatever that is that people turn up with. There's a problem if my services are not available to those people, that when they're available they're not accessible, that people actually can't get there. And if they're accessible, the people can't get there anyway because they're not affordable. It takes too much effort, too much time, too much energy for them to actually be there. So, and you can think about that from families who are coming from a cultural and linguistically diverse background within your own context who actually that's really challenging, that time, effort and energy, because navigating the systems is more complex, right?
Yeah.
So people can't get through the door, they can't get to you.
Yeah.
But when they're there, if they're there, do you accommodate for their communication support needs? Do you accommodate for their cognitive support needs? Do you accommodate for the special equipment that is needed in your rooms, in your space?
Sure.
Do you have what's needed to actually enable that person to be involved in that situation? Do you know how to do supported decision making with people who have complex communication and complex cognition? They are entitled to be advocates for themselves.
Absolutely.
And is what's being put in place acceptable to everybody?
Yeah.
And my second call to action is that we have to think like this and talk like this with families from the very beginning.
Yeah.
That children and families have repeated experiences of health and disability care, and if every experience supports them in navigating that, what's important to me, am I involved in the decision making around what is going to happen, who else is in the situation that needs to know, then they learn. Everybody gets to learn what works for this child and family, and that happens repeatedly over time. And so we have young people who can participate in the range of things that they need to, want to or have to do across the life course because they've learned and the community around them have learned what is required.
Yeah. Those are great action points for all of us. I know that I'm already thinking of things that we can do better already. So Christine, thank you so much for sharing. And I know that as soon as we talk about participation, there's just everyone has to think more and bigger and set that expectation up that it can be better. You know, we're not there yet. And I'm certainly taking that on. So thank you. I wish you all the best for the rest of the conference because you've got a very busy schedule. So thank you for putting this in.
Well, it's very beautiful to sit here in the monastery.
It is lovely, isn't it?
It's a lovely
bells
temperature.
Going. Yeah, the birds are still chirping. It's lovely.
It's gorgeous.
To all of our listeners, I hope you really enjoyed that as much as I did. This is so important. And hearing the heart of Christine here, I think, is something that inspires all of us. So thank you once again, Christine.
Thank you.
Talk to you all again really soon. Bye.